As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
One of the worst performances of my career, and they never doubted it for a second.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
You just gotta keep living, man. Livin.
Son of a bitch. Stole my life.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Welcome back to the Shot by Shot podcast, where we break down and analyze your favorite films so you can enjoy them more on a rewatch. We break down the play-by-play and analysis for all different kinds of films, old films, foreign films, modern films. And today we are discussing one of the best films of 2024, Coralie Fargeat's The Substance, starring Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, two of the best actresses of all time, and they absolutely bring their A game, along with Coralie Fargeat, who I think is easily one of the most interesting new voices to emerge in film in the last few years. This is a film that I heard so much hype for before I watched it, and as soon as, like, the very first image of the film, you just know that you're in for a truly cinematic experience, and you know it's cinema right from the first frame, and this could not have lived up to the high expectations more. And it's just this film speaks my language, and that language is pictures. It speaks truly through the image and is really painting a portrait of the themes and ideas of the movie so brilliantly. It leaves you with so much to think about. And yeah, it's almost overwhelming on a first watch, in my opinion, with just how much is kind of being thrown at you. And it's both the most beautiful, stylish film and the ugliest film at the same exact time. It's, a beautiful, stylish film, while also with horror. Like, it is such a range of emotions that you'll feel while watching this film. And it's not just an interesting story that they're telling, more so it's about the storytelling. And the storytelling here is on its absolute A game from Fargeat, and really just has so much to say about, our society, and just such a commentary on different issues in the modern world, which are expressed so brilliantly through the images, making this like a near silent movie. And like, I just am so happy that we got a film that's so close to a silent movie from such a talented director in 2024. But Ryan, I know you are a gigantic horror fan, so what are your thoughts on The Substance?
Yeah, I occur in pretty much everything you said. This was just everything that I love about film, basically. I was completely blown away with this, and I'd been waiting for something like this in like this year to really come out. It's been a solid year for horror. A lot of stinkers as well. Some big disappointments, but I had high expectations for this, and it still blew me away. Coralie Fargeat, her first film was amazing as well. I think she's really inserted herself as one of the best horror directors working right now. We have those like three like modern male horror directors that everybody lumps together, and Ari Aster, Eggers, and Jordan Peele. But Coralie and Julia Ducournau, as both French female directors, have created their kind of like own corner of the genre, which they are running it completely by themselves right now in body horror in a way that I don't think anybody really, apart from Cronenberg in the past, has really done it at this level consistently. I don't know who the third's going to be, but they've really earned their right to be in the best conversation, which is those first two features that they've released. And yeah, her direction is amazing in this. It's really maximalist. It's in your face. Really deploys formalism really well. I think there's a lot of levels to this. Points where you have to suspend your disbelief, and she creates this like otherworldly environment that just allows you to really just go into the horror side of it, like you're saying, and just go on the deep end and just keep going further and further. There's points in this film where I thought there was like, there's no way we can go further than this, and it just kept going. And I think a lot of horror films recently have never or not really reached those like highs that it does in this film. Just everything, the costume design, lighting, performances, everything. It pushes its themes. It's so good. It's so in your face, but it's so good. It's definitely the best horror film this year. It's up there for the decade as well for me. But yeah, so good. I give it a 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm glad that this year didn't deliver another horror disappointment, because there have been more than one, unfortunately. This for me was not one of those cases. you just know from like the opening couple of minutes it doesn't really care about subtlety, and I think that's this film's biggest play. In so many other films, it's just this approach just would not work, but I think it works. It's kind of crazy how well it works here, even though it really on paper it should not work. Like the way it like approaches its themes and like just executes them is crazy. It really is. Like you guys have been saying, it's just completely in your face. And it just keeps on hammering home these images just one after another until it's just not to kind of push them further, it's just to completely destroy them, just to until you get tired of it, I guess. But I think on first watch, like I still think this film was great, but I think on a rewatch for me, I think the kind of repetitive nature caught up a bit, but I still think this film was great. A solid 4 stars for me. But yeah, direction was it's really nice to see, and yeah, I love Margaret Qualley. She's so good. She's had such a good year. I haven't even seen Drive Away Dolls. But yeah, I really liked her in Kinds of Kindness. But yeah, Fargeat's first film, Revenge, is a really, really incredible debut. If people haven't seen that, I would highly recommend it. You kind of get a lot of films where the focus is on rape and it can get really tiring and distasteful, but I think that film works so well with what it does, and it is extremely stylish and exactly like this. But yeah, really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it was a year or two ago. I made probably my best prediction of all time, which was I said 10 years from now, we will be talking about Margaret Qualley, like we now talk about Emma Stone as easily one of the best actresses of all time. And that prediction just gets better and better every day because she is incredible. And her and Demi Moore, just both of them, I think, should be locks for nominations. There's such bravery from both of them. Just the things that they need to do to bring this film to life is things that couldn't have been comfortable for them. It wouldn't have been comfortable for many actresses. And they really do put themselves out there, whether it's Margaret Qualley with this kind of overly sexualized portrait of her, or Demi Moore, which is this very kind of unflattering portrait of her and certain imperfections. So there's just such bravery from both these actresses to bring a film like this to life. And we're going to get into all that, breaking down their characters, their performances, everything. And there's just, I agree with what Ryan said. This is just like everything I love in cinema, just pure visual storytelling and just kind of these poetic, expressive images to tell the story. Right away with the star on like the Walk of Fame, it literally, that star just tells you the evolution of that star before we even meet and see this character's face. We know the entire story of the character. It's just purely visual, absolutely brilliant. And obviously, this is anyone who's familiar with him knows that this film has a ton of influence of David Lynch, who is a filmmaker all three of us really admire and appreciate. And yeah, it's not the most subtle film necessarily, but it doesn't mean there isn't any depth to it. And I think, like David Lynch, Fargeat is kind of painting the film to us in repetition and patterns and these recurring visual motifs that we see so many of them. And it really reminds me of, in addition to the influence from David Lynch, Chantal Akerman, who is not as well known of a name as David Lynch, but is one of the most respected and influential filmmakers of all time, arguably the greatest female director of all time. And her most well-known and acclaimed film is Jean Dielman, which is basically 3.5 hours of repetitive chores that drives its audience absolutely nuts. And I think Fargeat really brings that repetition that Ackerman brings to Jean Dielman, but in a new way. And I think that repetition is something that it's a great filmmaking tool. I think we see time and time and again, it does turn some people off to the film. We saw this last year with The Zone of Interest, which also took a very kind of visual, no dialogue, repetition-based approach to its storytelling and themes, which, you know, some of us loved it. The three of us loved it, but it was definitely met with more divisiveness. And I see that happening with this film as well, where some audiences are kind of turned off by repetition. But I think it's so important because the two major themes that I think the film is dealing with is one being the beauty standards of society and the other being this fear of aging. And I think the way that Fargeat is using these images to kind of comment on these themes such as beauty standards. I think the repetition is important because they exist because the way to condition the human brain is through repetition. And it's whether it's scrolling through social media, whether it's watching TV or looking at a magazine, whatever it might be, it's the repetition of seeing these images again, again, and again, day after day, generation after generation, which is why these ideas exist. And that's why, and so I think it's important that one, I think the repetition is used to show visual contrast and part of the storytelling, but also because it's showing us how these ideas and standards are ingrained to us through this constant repetition, which is why I think it's so important. It's an important piece of the commentary. And the fear of aging is something that I really connect with. Like, it's one of my own biggest fears. Like, I'm terrified of aging every single day of my life. And, you know, I can only imagine what it's like for some women who I know really, it's a real fear and internal struggle for them. And I think that is really well explored in this film. And there's just so many themes and visual motifs to break down.
I'd seen some complaints about the repetition. Even on second watch, it was never something that bothered me. I feel like there's
I
enough
have a tiny
added
problem
to
with it. I just think I think the repetitive works to an extent, and then I think at just kind of one point, I think it just starts to get a tiny bit too much. I think it could be a tiny bit shorter.
Not to interrupt you, I just want to give a spoiler warning for everyone. We're going to spoil everything on this show.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen it, we highly recommend you go check it out. Hopefully we sold you on the film by now. So just bookmark this and come back once you've seen the film. But we are about to, we're spoiling everything. Everything's on the table. So I just wanted to give that disclaimer real quick.
Yeah, I should have checked that first. Yeah, and I feel like she adds enough every time that they go back to it. And enough anticipation for going back to Sue, which kind of plays into the character of Elizabeth Sparkle, just like spending your time waiting to go back to her. What part was it that you thought was repetitive?
I don't. It's not any part like in particular. I just think the whole nature of it. I just think is a tad too long. I do think it could have been cut down in parts. But yeah, no, still for me, I know looking on all my mutual scores is very divisive. You got a whole range of scores, and I think people more have a problem with it being hollow than repetitive, which is interesting. And I think it's one of those films where I can understand people's complaints. I just don't agree with them. Because
I don't really understand the complaints of it being hollow at all. Like, they're in your face, which I think with this concept, I don't think there's not an option where it couldn't be. Like, just hearing that concept alone brings alone, it's like the themes of like aging and stuff like that, like, and that you could just guess before even watching the movie. But
I think people
goes beyond.
The hollow kind of accusations come from the repetitiveness. It's like it just keeps on saying the same thing over and over again, and like it doesn't have anything else to say at one point. I think that's what people are trying to say, and I don't think for me didn't have. I think it starts to get to that point, but it dropped my rating down by half a star. But yeah, for me, the extent of it isn't that effective.
I personally disagree. I think I can understand why like casual fans and people who aren't as into film and don't really love this film. But from people who are more into cinema as a craft, I don't really understand the criticism of it being like shallow or hollow as much, because I think just because it's not subtle doesn't mean it's not deep. And I think these images really do leave you with so much to think about. There's so much like depth and commentary to the images and the kind of poetic quality that they create. The same way that you can go to a museum and you can look at just a painting, and that painting can say so much about that point in time and certain ideas about whatever it is that painting's exploring. And even I feel like it's almost the same concept where there's just so much to kind of look into with these images. As for the kind of hollowness, I think that more comes to characters than the story itself, where we don't learn much about these characters and we don't really get to know them as people. And I think that's very it's not like a character study. And I think that's very intentional from Fargeat, who's really commenting on the fact that no one seems to have any interest in who these characters are, and the world sees their value only based on how they look, and that seems to be the only thing anyone's interested in. I think it really connects a lot with, of course, social media, whether it's, we've seen films like Sunset Boulevard, which explore similar themes, but in the world today, this kind of Hollywood beauty standards more comes, I think, from social media than movies, which are still a part of it as well. But I think when you look at, like, whether it's Instagram or TikTok, like, you're not like getting to know these people as much. It's very just looking at images of whether it's a model on a magazine or an Instagram model, whoever it might be. It's not really like you're getting to the way that the public interacts with these stars is not getting to know their personalities as much as it is just purely looking at the images of them. And I think Fargeat is commenting on this, how societies are really only interested in the image and how they look rather than who they are as people, which is why I think she doesn't go in depth with the different sides of the character's psychology or the relationships of the character. These characters have no friends, family, any type of relationships. And it really is, I think it's intentional commentary on what the society's interested in rather than trying to do a character study on who they are as people, because she's commenting on the fact that society doesn't seem very interested in who they are as people.
Yeah,
Or,
I agree.
like,
I think
placements for people in real life, or they're not caricatures. I mean, the performances are a bit campy at time, like the men, but like it's like almost a comedic level, but it's like scarily accurate to people that would actually be in real life. As I've seen Coralie Forgeot said that like even the producers that she's met in real life are like the guy played by Dennis Quaid, who, although is over the top, it's still quite realistic and it's a bit scary in itself.
Yeah, for me, like there's one just aspect of the film I don't see people talking about that I think is really clever. I always love it when filmmakers use cities as characters, and I think Fargo does such a good job of using LA as this kind of icon of absurd stardom and just the duality of Hollywood stars. We're getting cut palm trees constantly, and you kind of get the kind of contrast of like walking on the streets, and then like the places that she goes to get the substances just in this completely like run down area. And yeah, I just think it just works so well, especially the constant palm trees and the looking up, and you kind of get those starry nights as well, and that glitter we see it a couple of times, that shot of like her eyes, like the glitter all over it. But I get just this hammering home unsubtlety, I think just works wonders here. And Los Angeles is an interesting place. I think is really well used in this film, and is just, well, obviously it's a perfect setting because it's just Hollywood, but I think it's just beyond. It's beyond that as well. For me, it just works so well, and in that is very Lynchian, like Alex said. That I think I like Ryan and I were saying that like the Lost Highway lip shot, like she replicates that with specifically with like the lighting as well. It works really, it's really effective, and it does feel Lynchian. You kind of get Mulholland Drive vibes. I got Mulholland Drive from like the whole story in general, the like duality between the characters and the kind of slips in reality and surrealistic qualities that some of the sequences have, where you don't know if this is actually happening or not. But it's also heavily Kubrick inspired as well. The way the hallways are shot and the carpets on the floor is just got Kubrick painted all over it. But yeah, I like it when filmmakers use inspiration like this, but not to the point that it's derivative. And I don't think this film does that at all.
Exactly, yeah. I really love the Lynch stuff. We've seen so many films this year with Lynch, but this used probably one of the best things that Lynch does is he always has a very distinctive use of place, like you said, as a character. And you're always seeing LA. It's literally like the backdrop of their apartment, pretty much the whole film. And the only time you go outside is those palm trees that you're seeing, and it's very different depending on what character you go out with. You see, with Sue, sometimes you'll also see the streets or some cars and stuff. So she uses the locations really brilliantly to kind of show the two sides of the characters. And LA is, like you're saying, is just the perfect place for it. Also, like in terms of influences, just like The Shining, the mirror stuff inside the bathroom. There's the scene in The Shining where like the old woman is in the bathroom. I feel like there's kind of inspiration from that as well. The Thing, just for all the practical effects, and just John
Yeah.
Carpenter's brilliance there. The Fly, which comes into the later end of the film, which we'll talk about. And there's a movie called Seconds from the 60s where it's a man getting surgery to change his identity and become this new person. So I feel like she also got a lot of influence from that. So yeah, there's a lot of influences from horror in here, but like you said, it doesn't overplay the movie. It's still very unique in its own way and kind of makes their own monster version of all these things together. And horror's always been a great kind of vehicle to express problems in the world, and I think Fargeat kind of takes advantage of this with the way the genre can kind of explore themes, and it's so good. Like we've been saying, I like how the characters are almost over the top, like we were talking about, and they're kind of placements for just people in real life. And I feel like the repetition doesn't really get. I didn't really notice it much because I feel like the themes developed as we go through, because when we're at the start we are introduced to Elisabeth and Dennis Quaid, and it kind of introduces like the ageism in Hollywood and kind of pushing her out for being too old. And then once we get into the kind of actual substance part of it, where her and Sue are coexisting, we're talking about like modern beauty standards. Going into that, the way Elizabeth starts to just hate the way she looks in every way. And then later into the film, we start going to substance abuse, where she's pretty much just addicted to it like a drug. And it goes very Requiem for a Dream, where she's pretty much just like stuck inside her in her room doing nothing, just waiting in the darkness for that time where she can go to Sue. So all the inspirations, I feel like it's constantly switching up. So I didn't really feel like the repetition was a bad part of it in any way.
Very Carrie-esque, like the final sequence, really.
Yeah, sure.
Just like the dress as well, and just the scene where like I don't even know what to call it. Well, it's what comes out of Sue.
The
But when
monster.
when the monster's curling her hair, like the strand of hair, that's so funny. Just puts the earring in. Oh, it's brilliant. It's so good.
There's so much blood too. She loves blood, like she did in her first film as well.
That scene where she's curling the hair. It also, we talked about references, but that scene, the score to me sounds nearly identical to the scene at the end of towards the end of Vertigo, where Vertigo is a film about crafting the image of, in his mind, the perfect woman, and the scene where she is kind of coming out as that image he has in his head. The music sounds almost the same in that image, as in that moment. So that's another reference that I call. But I think uh, there's no influence that's clearer than David Lynch, of course, especially Mulholland Drive, with like the semi dissolves and the kind of overlapping of images to create like a connection between them. And a Lynch film is often commenting on things in the real world, but doing it in kind of his own reality that resembles ours, but it's not completely, it's never like grounded in our reality. And that's totally what Fargeat brings here. Like it makes it very clear early on that the film has no interest in plot holes or anything like that. That's not what this film is. It's more about the expression and exploration of certain ideas and themes rather than like a traditional grounded in reality plot. And I think that I totally agree with Oscar. I think I really love films that have a sense of place, and I think places are often just as interesting as people. And the way it captures LA with mainly the theme of the and motif of the palm trees, I think is one of the biggest strengths of this film, since LA is kind of the center mecca of these ideas that the film's exploring. And I think, of course, obviously you can connect a lot of that to Mulholland Drive. But I think it reminds me kind of like La Dolce Vita, in that La Dolce Vita is a series of portraits of different things that capture the essence of the place of Rome. And I think this film is really doing a lot of that for LA in a modern way. Obviously, we've seen films besides Mulholland Drive, we've seen films like Sunset Boulevard, which have explored this as well. And I think this is really doing that in a modern way, where, like I said, we're so flooded with these images through things like social media, where it's not even like hearing the women speak, it's just purely the images, which I think connects to the more shallow or lack of depth to the characters. But there's also so many just visual motifs throughout this film that are being that are kind of conditioning us. And one, of course, is just the color yellow. The color yellow opens up the film with the egg that turns into two, and there's just such a boldness to the color yellow against the white, which she also has that yellow coat that she wears every single time that she goes to refill the package or get a new package or whatever. Palm trees, of course, whether it's we see the first one, I believe, when we see that fly that's stuck in the glass of wine, kind of like how Elizabeth feels stuck and like she can't go anywhere. And then that dissolves into the first palm trees, which then are one of the final images of the film. They're kind of we're normally looking down on the palm trees. They're normally up above. There's only one that I can remember. It's at nighttime where we're like even like essentially eye level with the palm trees. Normally it's like something up, we're looking up at, like it's something we're aspiring to. The shower is reused, and it's also like completely enclosed at times where like there's no door to the shower. It's like a full box, like, which is obviously ultra surrealist. But that entire bathroom, there's just such a strong, clean color white that's like overpowering with its brightness and like how clean it is. And the shower, whether it's the shower running or scenes of normally Elizabeth in the shower, that's always very reused throughout the film. Lights and cameras as well. And this is obviously Fargeat commenting on what we point cameras at, and what we shine lights on is, of course, the most beautiful women and most beautiful images, which is definitely what she's commenting on, and like what happens then behind those cameras. Loneliness and isolation is another big theme. There is the recurring element of the flowers, which is used with visual contrast to kind of show the difference between the two characters, with Demi Moore's message being like, thank you for like your years of hard work, and Margaret Qualley's being like, we love you. Of course, then there's the bookend of the star, which opens and closes the film. Fargeat multiple times uses close-ups on characters' mouths, whether it's, you know, the shots of Sue, played by Margaret Qualley's mouth, like when they freeze frame it with the TVs, or when it's Dennis Quaid's mouth, which he's introduced to us with this wide angle close up on his mouth, which when you put something close to a wide angle lens, it really distorts it and makes it look even more uncomfortable. So they use multiple close-ups on Dennis Quaid's mouth, whether it's, you know, him then eating the shrimp, which is a really disgusting scene we'll discuss, along with when he's like blowing the smoke out of his mouth. So she uses tight close-ups on people's mouths multiple times. The billboard, of course, is saying a lot to us visually. It's when it gets teared down, the image of Demi Moore, that's when she's distracted, which then leads to the car crash, which moves all this forward. Some smaller ones would be like the bed sheets that Margaret Qualley lays in are pink when it's like she's first being Sue and she's doing this like her rise. And then when she's been indulging in this side to the character too long, and now it's really killing the Elizabeth character, those sheets are with the same shot and composition are now black sheets. And then there's the bottom of the trash can shot. First, he drops the flash drive, and then it becomes chicken. And I think a major recurring element throughout this film is the use of food and unappealing foods. And if you notice Demi Moore's character, there's often these like leftover foods in the fridge that are like they're past their prime and unappealing. And she's really, I think, using food as kind of like once again another visual thematic commentary. And of course, the shrimp scene is probably coming to everyone's mind, just with the sound of the crunch, the eyes on the shrimp, the wide angle, the shakiness, the mess, and just like him sucking the meat out of the shell. It's grosser than any of the horror and blood and gore that you see in this film. I think most people would agree with that. But like I said, I think like these recurring repetitive elements are such a strength to the film.
Yeah, the way she deploys that like close-up mouth of Dennis Quaid eating is so disgusting, and she does it in a similar way in her first film that's so effective, and it just makes you hate him so much, even though he already is like a horrible person to her. And yeah, he really is like the driving force for a lot of the themes about Hollywood, where it's pretty much the first thing we're introduced to once we meet Elizabeth Sparkle is like him. There's this one hour where they go into the toilet, she goes into the bathroom, he comes out, there's that close-up of him peeing, which, like you said, the wide angle lens just makes him look so disgusting. And we're introduced to him talking about how that she's basically going to get kicked out. He can't believe how long she's lasted in Hollywood in the business when she's that old. And he says like something like women's like eggs start to decrease at 25 or something, which is even true. I think it's like 30 or something. So he's just like disgusting in like every way he looks and says. And yeah, just that's such a good setup for kind of like the beginning of the ageism in Hollywood. It even works in a way like Sunset, the way that Sunset Boulevard worked, where like Norma Desmond, where the actor also felt like the same way. I feel like it works here as well because Demi Moore coming out in the 90s. I think she was the most paid actress at the time. I think, and she's kind of spoken out about how she also felt sidelined by Hollywood when she turned 40 in multiple interviews. So it really correlates between her and the character of Elizabeth Sparkle, like an actress that's been cast aside and replaced by a younger version of herself. Again, reflecting Hollywood's kind of fixation on the youth and tendency just to replace them and just be an endless cycle of that. So I think her being in this, along with it being her best performance, was just really effective. And again, I love that kind of like feminist horror that she goes down to, like in her first one, where it says so much about modern beauty standards, just the whole concept of the substance, where Sue's made out to be this like ridiculously perfect standard of beauty that just isn't possible, and the point where Margaret Qualley is like, I don't know to the extent she is, but she's pretty much covered in prosthetics to make her look like the perfect human, pretty much. So it wasn't even possible for her to look like that without that. And the way that people just take these extreme measures in real life to kind of reach these modern beauty standards, I think it correlates well with the themes of the movie. Like obviously not to like this such like direct consequences like in the film, like with her hand becoming really old or like her becoming Gollum like at the end, but like there's so many like surgeries or alterations that people do in real life that ages them. Like there's so many people in like their 20s that are taking like lip filler, facelifts, all these types of like surgeries that are making them age, which obviously isn't the intended aim of them doing it. So I feel it really says a lot about like modern society, or the way obviously it's not like as a weird science fiction like concept like this, but it is sort of like what people are doing to themselves in real life. And just that relationship between Elizabeth and Sue works so well, where Sue takes more of her to keep the beauty, and it just keeps going on destroying Elizabeth's body, and she can't really stop doing it. Even though it is ridiculous by the fact that Demi Moore looks great for her age, it like makes it even more like ridiculous that she keeps looking at herself as like this ugly person. As the film goes further along, and then by the end she wishes that she could be back to what she was at the start, which I think says a lot about what it's like in real life for women looking at their age, or just anybody looking at the way they used to look. So yeah, I feel like there's a lot of depth within the themes as well, other than the stuff that goes in your face.
Yeah. You're just talking about kind of repeated shots, but one that stuck out for me is I think it's used about 3 times, but it's I just really like the way that Fargeat shot the interior sequences in the apartment. I think very clever. But one shot in particular is kind of on the kitchen side, and you've got the wall, and there's kind of 2 kind of frames within a frame of the wall. You can see the TV on the left, and you can see the portrait on the right, and the table's kind of in front of the wall in the foreground. And that
You can also see the billboard.
Yeah, you can also see the billboard. But it's just a really clever shot. I think the first time we see it, she sat down at the table and there's like a cleaner cleaning behind her. You know, she's kind of at this in this film at the height of her kind of stardom. You know, she's got people like doing for her, and as the film goes on, when the shot uses again, she's on the other side of that wall, and she's the one as the kind of the substance as it starts to make her like grow really old, and she's kind of there at the TV, and it's kind of that same shot again, but like I said, she's on the other side of the wall, so she's kind of getting further and further and down. And I think it was a really nice composed shot, and I like the way that it was used more than once, and kind of the positioning of characters in the foreground and background, and the implications of it. But yeah, really nice shot.
The billboard is a funny one when it first pops up as well, because it literally just says no show. Like, she really does emphasize how this really is like its own world. Really, it's not like based in real life. Like all the locations, it's it really just it looks like its own world, like we're saying, like Lynch likes to do. He creates his own world where it doesn't play by the rules of real life. So that's why it can go like really extreme and just delve into the horror side of it and just get ridiculous.
Yeah, I think the character work in this film is very interesting. It's not a film like Oppenheimer, let's say, which is, you know, exploring multiple sides to the character and their feelings and like perspectives and things like that. It's the characters are more rooted in the ideas that are expressed through them. But I think that is it's really well done and interesting, especially with Elizabeth's character. We first see her like when I'm thinking in my head in that first scene of Demi Moore is like, wow, Demi Moore looks really good for her age. Like, I think that most people are looking at Demi Moore in the opening scene are more thinking that she's attractive than unattractive. It's only when Dennis Quaid's character says that she's too old and lets her go that she starts questioning herself and feeling that kind of insecurity about her looks, and which really motivates the rest of the film. And like as a guy, like I'm not sold beauty products, but of course, like if you look at any commercial on TV or billboards, like they are pushed on women like constantly. It's one of the biggest industries, is all these different beauty products and things like that. Also, in Demi Moore's introduction, it's her birthday and everyone's wishing her happy birthday, which is, of course, emphasizing that fear of aging with the birthday not being something that's celebratory, but something that is now dreaded by the characters. And it's interesting, Elizabeth's character, because her desire to look younger actually makes her age quicker and become less attractive in the end, where we see her determination all visually for how much she wants this product. Like when she goes in and it's in the shadiest like alley, like this tight alley between the steps, the thing doesn't even go up all the way. Like we're all thinking the same thing, like we're anticipating danger. She literally crouches down to where there's like all like needles and dirt. Like she gets like down and dirty just to get to this product. So all that and the risk that she puts herself in shows us just how much this product and this how determined she is for this product that can make her essentially look or feel younger again. And I think that ultimately we see is that each time she spends time in the Sue body, it results in her aging more and becoming less attractive herself, which I think could be a metaphor for, like scrolling through social media and looking at, whether it's a model or actress, whoever it might be, and essentially immersing yourself in their life. And what does that lead to on Elizabeth's side? She is so consumed and spending so much time in the body of Sue that she stops taking care of herself and is basically just deteriorating her own health by obsessing over this youth that it ages her and ultimately makes her less attractive because of that. So I think that really can be a metaphor for this kind of constantly scrolling and living vicariously through the lives of celebrities. And it starts with things like, first we see the imprint of the couch because she's just spending so much time watching TV, which is something that there are a lot of people who do spend all their time watching TV and essentially living through these celebrities. And then the first one, of course, it starts with the finger, which is just brilliantly revealed to us. And then it becomes the legs and then the like the frizzy hair and then ultimately into Gollum. But before all of that, I think one of the strongest scenes of the film, and especially her character, is the date scene where she's ready to go on this date. This guy seems really excited. He's like overwhelming with excitement to be on a date with her. He really is attracted to her. And she's like, first we see her in the mirror. She does things like throw the scarf over herself to cover her skin a bit more. So we see like a little bit of hints of her kind of being insecure about her appearance. But then it's when she looks at Sue before leaving that she really starts questioning herself and puts on more makeup. And ultimately, like we talked about, those wide lenses that make everything look uglier or more warped and distorted. It's that reflection that she sees of herself that really makes her question herself when she's looking at the doorknob and that angle totally distorts her reflection, reflecting her own distorted image of herself. And that's really what makes her this really sad scene where she smears the makeup and the guy's like blowing her phone up because he's so excited. And the camera's placed behind her because she feels so much shame that like we don't even look at her, kind of like the unmotivated camera move away from Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver. And her character, even though this guy is really excited, is just worried that she's not going to live up to his expectations and that she's not good enough, is going to let him down. So it's such like a heartbreaking and very powerful scene for this character in a film that people say doesn't really lacks kind of emotional depth, maybe, which I don't agree with. But I think that is one of the most emotionally powerful scenes of the film. And, then ultimately when she becomes Gollum, she drags that old picture of the Demi Moore we open up the film with back out. And now, after indulging in this product, she now appreciates how she used to look and realizes, how good she looked at the start of the film that led to this whole sequence of events in the first place. And then in the end, or not in the end, towards the end, it's Sue, when they have the fight, makes her look at her own reflection next to her, the young one, and then essentially smashes her into her own reflection, which I think all of these are just really powerful metaphors for the way that Fargeat is exploring this character, brilliantly portrayed by Demi Moore.
Yeah, I completely agree. The scene we haven't talked about yet, that first switch sequence is crazy. Just the reveal on that, the intensity on the eyes, we like cut to the eye specifically so many times, and then it starts to split, and it's absolutely crazy. And just then the back opens up, the score is glaring in the background. Really, really great score, by the way. I love techno scores so much, and I like the way they incorporated it with like the workout scenes. Do you not like techno scores?
I'm not like opposed to them, but actually that's one of my biggest criticisms. That might be my only like major criticism of the film, is like it's these like dubstep type of like, I don't know, to me
techno scores are so good.
I'm seeing a trend in them this year, and I'm just like, all right, enough. Like I actually wrote in one of my reviews, I don't know if you saw it, these are temporary.
She used Revenge, her first film, has a techno score, and it's really, really nice. So I don't think it's just like a this year, that's her kind of thing. But yeah, I love techno scores. But yeah, that that first switch sequence is crazy. Just the bag opening up. It just absurd. And the guy that wants to go on a date with her, that the first interaction they have, just so stupid. Like, oh, I remember you from like 10th grade, the most random thing like 40 years ago. It's just the obsession that you actually know that and have got that imprinted into your mind. It's so funny. And then he drops the like his phone number in the water, and is and then you've got the guy next door as well, who's opposite her apartment, who's just the most obsessive and creepy guy ever. Just the scenes at her door where it's looking through the door hole, and the the scene. Actually, I want to get your guys' opinions on this because I know some people have questioned it. The scene where she beats, they beat each other. Well, no, Sue beats Elisabeth up. Do you think that actually happened, or do you think that was a in their mind situation, like some of the sequences in that was? Because we see Sue's kick when she absolutely launches Elisabeth over the room into the glass table. That was crazy. That she went so far.
Yeah, some great wire work in that scene.
Yeah,
I don't know. I thought it was actually happening when I first watched it. I don't think it's in my head.
The funny bit is when she goes to terminate her, she's like, the scene before, she's all crooked because she's just gone into this form, and when she comes back, she's just running and sprinting around the apartment. It's just dragging her all over the floor, and it's so funny. Just the change in pace is crazy. But
It's
that's
like
kind of the only...
Phantom of the Paradise. when she does that. Like when
That's
she's
kind of
running through the studio.
Real
the
quick,
only thing is, yeah.
I was just gonna say because you mentioned the guy who lives across. I think the funniest moment of the film is like first we see he's introduced to us when it's Margaret Qualley and he's like angry. She opens the door and he's like hit by surprise by like how good she
Yeah.
looks. But then when it's like Gollum Elizabeth and he's hit by surprise and he's terrified, that was for me. I was cracking up. I thought that was the funniest moment of the film.
Is the really quick one. Is like he comes to the door, and just comes barging out. And
That moment was hilarious because he's like all excited and it's fucking hilarious.
I never the speed that she moves at in that scene is so hilarious. How quick she is so funny.
It really is.
The
Oh,
fact
dear.
that that fight has dream logic kind of plays into an almost theory that I have, and I'm interested to see what you hear about it because not that it's in their head, but at the start of the film, we're talking about when she sees the billboard and she's in a car crash and she's left completely fine. I was thinking this whole thing could be like a coma or a dream or something like that. Like once past that point, because she plays with something like that in her first film that you've seen at Oscar. There's a moment in that film where there's a moment in that film where the rest could be a dream, and I feel like she plays kind of with that in this film possibly.
It's just got Mulholland Drive written all over it. That's what I was just thinking of half this film.
That's not ridiculous to say that.
I'm glad that it's as ambiguous, kind of that side of it is anyway. But yeah, it is really interesting to think about. The scene where she's like she's in the hospital from the car crash, and you get the guy who like examines her. Did you know straight away that guy was a younger version?
He's got birthmark and he's rest.
Yeah, I know, but I know. But did you know in that? I know Alex maybe not because he didn't know the concept of the film beforehand, or like maybe the synopsis. But did you like as soon as that guy popped up, I was like, he just looks way too good to be an actual human.
Yeah,
it's like the jawline was crazy.
I didn't know that because like I didn't know the concept of the film. I didn't know I knew literally nothing about this film except that Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley are in it and that it was a horror movie. But I will say that when they first cut to, it's like her sitting forward and behind it's him and the doctor. And there's stillness in the frame and the way his eyes move like slightly because his eyes move like Fargeat drew my eye to him. And I'm like, just in a way where I'm like, sometimes you can see an image and you know something's up with someone. It's like, all right, this character is going to do something that matters in the story.
Definitely.
Did anyone else notice that?
And it's like
real quick, there's only 2 boxes at the place where they.
Yeah, there is only 2 boxes. There's only 2 of them.
207 and 503.
And 207 is the other guy.
I didn't notice that.
So because like 207 could be like the main guy who's actually doing it. But I noticed that as well. There's so many things, but there's only 2 of them have numbers on it. So it's like, how big? We don't even know like how big actually is this? Is she the only like second person who's actually taken it, or is it? It's crazy. And that's the other thing actually. There's one specific cut. There's this like the juxtaposition between like the scenes in LA, like when she goes into the place, like where all the thing is, we should kind of walk down to that hallway and she turns right, and then just such a harsh cut to like just the completely white room, and it just is crazy. Just one of those things that just blinds you. But yeah, it's a very nice contrast there.
I loved the difference between when Elisabeth is walking to that room, because it's like, I think I'm pretty sure it's handheld. It's very shaky, and there's like barely any visibility of Ellie. It's very close up on Elisabeth's face. And then when Sue goes out, like you start to see the cars and the shops and just everything around it. It's just a lot more colourful as well. And their clothes, the clothes are a great side of that as well. The costume design of just wearing like old and like lots of old clothes and like lots of layers and stuff compared to the Sue's the more Valley girl with colourful clothes. So yeah, going back to like the environments, I think they've done a good job of kind of showing LA differently for both of their sides. When they're going in between the boxes or just going out to the studio.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to Sue as a character, I think obviously she's not as explored as Demi Moore's character. She's more defined by like this hypersexualization of her, and is essentially like a character who is like born like she's essentially not a child, but like she's a character who's born in the film, and even though she's like old, she's like probably 21 to 25, anywhere in that range. Like she's not a character who has as much lived in experience, is what I'm getting at. And
She doesn't even have a second name, and they don't care because she's just beautiful.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah, that works really well.
exactly. And I think we don't have as much depth to the character because there's just the characters lived less experience, but we see things like the even though she is considered like the perfect woman in this film, there's a great scene where there's she's dancing and it's like we're locked into the kind of routine that she's doing, and then all of a sudden there's this lump on her body that we see for like a split second, and there's this really suspenseful kind of, oh, the director saw something, and like going frame by frame with it, where Fargeat really creates this suspenseful anticipation, almost like a Hitchcock bomb theory type of situation. And this kind of reminds us that even when you're dealing with someone as beautiful as Margaret Qualley, just how high stakes it is at all times. And even though she's not in the position that Elizabeth is, there still is it still all can kind of be, if there's the slightest imperfection in her body, then it all could come crashing down. And like there's this high stakes for these high standards of perfection at all times. And I think that that is a really interesting element explored through the Sue characters, that even though we see that she is like flawlessly perfect, it's the slightest flaw could ruin everything for her, which just shows you just how high the standards are and the stakes. And her character, the relationship between the two is I think a strength to it is that it's, of course, Elizabeth looking back on the youth that she misses and she wants to feel again. But it's also Sue, Margaret Qualley's character, looking at Elizabeth as a fear of what she doesn't want to become. Where each time we enter the Sue body, we see her just so grossed out by the aftermath of Elizabeth. And there's the interview scene where we see this kind of, I guess you could say, lack of respect for the older generation, where
That's the
Elizabeth,
funniest scene in the movie, possibly.
it is funny.
Wait, which scene is that?
When she's
Margaret
watching her on the
Qualley's
TV and cooking.
Oh yeah.
and she's
And it's
cooking.
such a campy performance from Demi Moore, but it's so good.
Is when it's the monster and she's got the thing over of Elizabeth Sparkle, and she just walks up to the door and God just says, "Oh yeah, you can just come in." just doesn't, just nothing, and she just walks in. It's so funny.
But yeah, I think there's that in that scene. Elizabeth says, she's like, "I created you," which obviously in the actual like plot of the film, like, yes, she did use the substance to create her. But if we're speaking in terms of like what it's likely a metaphor for, in terms of our own reality, I think it's, the stars like Elizabeth essentially do create the stars of the next generation. And like the beautiful, iconic images of Elizabeth are what inspires and creates someone like Sue to want to pursue this same path as her, where when she becomes Sue, she has essentially a chance to start over, and she knows where it ended up for Elizabeth. And she could essentially use this youth to go in any direction, but she chooses the Elizabeth route once again and to live that again, which I think is commenting on how, it's not just in terms of the actual events that we see in terms of this substance, but in real life, how the stars and the beauty standard stars of one generation are what causes the next generation to follow the same path, which I think is pretty interesting commentary. And then I think that the ultimate kind of culmination of Sue's character is the scene where it's like the 2001: A Space Odyssey music, where she walks up into the spotlight as the monster in the third act. And we don't see the audience scream like we kind of expect them to. And then we see she has the mask of Elizabeth. And I think that's just such a great, it's such a commentary on kind of beauty products as a whole, and all of these different beauty products and like the mask of them that that some people hide behind. So I think that there's still a lot of very interesting commentary and exploration of Bruce Sue's character as well as Elisabeth's.
Yeah, that scene when she gets the food in her like butt and like squeezes it through into her belly button is like that's one of the hardest to
the
watch.
chicken.
Uh,
I think for me the
that's
hardest
I'm
to
sure
watch.
that's a dream sequence as well in the film. There's that, and there's the scene when the monster is walking in, and like you're saying, when she has the finger over her face, and everybody's like reacting nicely to her. I'm pretty sure that's a dream as well. Like they both kind of at the end. Yeah, what were you saying?
The hardest scene to watch, I think, when she's kind of repeatedly taking stuff out, it gets like where she takes stuff out gets more and more worse, and like where she has to put it in just gets like all just infected, and it's awful every time she has to stick that long needle in. Oh my goodness! Oh, that gets tough to watch. But yeah, I just like the way the body horror just kind of built up and built up and built up as it went along, and just insane finale as a whole. Just the amount of blood, so it's just like a cannon of blood. Just opens up one thing,
I
and
love
yeah,
this
the
so
scene
much.
where she like someone just smashes her head off and like just starts growing out again, and like her arm falls off. And it's when the thing falls out and it's like got an umbilical cord on the end of it.
Like the boob out of her eye.
Yeah. Oh, that was funny. But I think one really interesting part as well is we get like the title, not title cards, but we get cards like flashing up like the "You Are One" over and over again. Like it's like images in their head, but it's done in an extremely unsubtle ways. Like they literally just flash up the text on screen, but we also get kind of the voices in the head as well. I thought that was really clever. But yeah,
that's what was kind of
I
pushing me
think
towards thinking it was a dream. Like when when she's about to stab her with the black goo, I don't remember what it's called, but like and she hears the voice, like it's very dreamlike.
Yeah, and then
I agree. I think the whole film's very dreamlike.
Alex, you were talking about the lack of kind of Sue's character, but in the end, that they are actually one. So I think that what kind of lends itself is that they are actually one character, and that's maybe why that character's been explored as well. But I don't. It's not just like so black and white in film. Not every film, like if a character isn't explored well or fleshed out, it won't work for a number of films. But a film like this, it worked perfectly. And I know Alex, if I haven't seen it, but Red Rooms, which you talk about a lot, the main character in that film is just not explored at all. But it works perfectly for the film. It really, really perfectly and very effectively.
I honestly did not disagree with you more on that one, if I'm being honest.
Really?
I think that character is explored as more than almost any character I've ever seen.
What? No, okay, it's explored. Okay, we'll maybe
we'll save this for the Red Rooms episode. We can have a quick discussion after. But so stay tuned. You got to subscribe if you want to see our Red Rooms episode where we discuss this. But yeah, I think that film actually is the opposite of this.
Interesting.
In terms of character approach.
Oh yeah, I think in terms of subtlety, definitely. But yeah.
No, I mean just in terms of the dimensions and depth of the character and like what is explored.
I do like the ambiguity behind the characters though. Just one quick thing. I liked what Alex was going back to at the start of this, where he said it is like a silent film, and I saw that in your first review, and I made sure to like check it out. I was thinking about it for the whole second watch, and if you go back and just watch this, pretty much every single thing is shown visually, without exposition. There's been some exposition complaints about this, which I have no idea what they're talking about. There was only like one. There's barely any dialogue in this film. Everything is shown through facial expressions, pretty much for the characters. There's only one thing where they actually kind of do tell you, and it's when they're explaining it's the substance video where like the needle drop comes in, but even that is shown visually with the egg at the start. You could understand it. So yeah, just visually brilliant. The needle drop for that video, by the way, where we go into the TV. I don't know how you're saying the score isn't good because it's so good in that moment.
Yeah, it is.
It has its moments. It does. But
Yeah.
yeah, anyone who says this film is too much exposition, like what fucking movie did you watch? Like this movie is literally no, like, except for the scene Ryan's talking about. There's no exposition.
It doesn't even explain how the substance is used. Like, I was confused how she was gonna like for the switching and like for the food and
Yeah.
stuff. Like, you just find out as the character does it.
Yeah, I think the silent film element is just such a strength to this film. Every image, like I said, like from the very first frame, you know this is cinema. Every single image is so precisely crafted. You know, even things like just opening up with the bold color, the perfectly composed shots. Like I did not think it was possible for a film to even be in the same conversation for best cinematography this year as Greg Fraser's work on Dune Part 2. And this might actually have surpassed that. Like I don't know which is I'm not sure which is which yet, but which I would prefer yet, but I think that this is just as good. Like there's not a single inch of this frame that is wasted. Every single from the edges where they're composed, like it is as precisely crafted as any image can be to absolute perfection. Things like when early on, when Elizabeth or Margaret Qualley is walking through that red hallway of the posters, how the posters are elevated above them in the frame, with them taking up about like 3/4 of the frame, and then the posters filling the frame vertically, just showing how the image is bigger than them. And yeah, like it's these are not only beautiful images to look at, they're communicating the ideas to us. The images are used not only to look good, but and they're it's really is like where it both is appealing to look at most of the time, not always appealing to look at, but like but also communicate the ideas, information, and themes of the film to us.
It's very Kubrick. Other than the obvious influences, it's a very clean kind of like production and movie. Very timeless. It's dystopian in a way as that some of Kubrick's movies are as well. There's no really like there's not any huge moments that really put it in a time or place. Apart, I mean, it's so weird because it's like at the start it looks like a like 80s film, but then there's like modern technology, and throughout it's so weird. It's just in its own like little world that doesn't really put it in a certain time period.
Yeah, real quick, I actually questioned at first. I'm glad you said that because I forgot. If when I first watched this, the first like maybe 10, 20 minutes, I thought like, is this set in the 80s? Like I was actually questioning if it was set in the 80s at the beginning. And then it gets super, you see really modern elements like with that advertisement. And it's like it really does have that timeless, surreal world quality of like almost like a La La Land of you don't really know what time it exists in. Did anyone have anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the practical effects for it because she put obviously a lot of focus on doing this pretty much without any CGI. I think there was only a few moments where they had to like remove small elements of the costumes and stuff that they couldn't just completely hide. But even there's like 80% of this film is achieved practically, which is well and above the standard for pretty much any film nowadays, and it goes far beyond, like I said, any horror this year. We've had some horror like The First Omen, which has got freaky, but that's just kept blowing my expectations away every time. There's a moment in this film where she's gonna deactivate Sue, and I was so upset. I was like, please do not end the film here. And then it didn't, and it just kept going. And then the monster just like is insane stuff. And the way they done the fact they done the monster like practically is so cool. And worn by Margaret Qualley as well. It's got the blood scene at the end. It's a custom rig they built. It's like a fireman hose to like just shoot blood. I wonder how much blood they use in this. That was a ridiculous amount in that final scene. And the second stage they used, it was Demi Moore in the costume where she's like Gollum and fully crippled. I think it was 8 hours of makeup for Demi Moore to get into that, so it's actually her in the costume, and then Margaret Qualley in the final form as well. A mashup of the two, where she needed like a cooling vest and stuff. Like it's very advanced from the days of like Carpenter and like The Thing, which obviously influenced the final form of this monster in this movie, like it does at the end of The Thing. And shout out to the special effects artist Pierre Olivier Persin, who created both of those costumes for it, because he does such a great job. the mutations and just disfigurements at the end are just crazy stuff. It really is like horror body like masterclass. Like there's not many films that even reach this level of like absurdity. Really, there's like Alter States, The Thing. There's really not much that like even level this. It's obviously highly influenced from like The Godfather of body horror. Cronenberg, his influences are all over her like two films. So yeah, the practical effects are just it's so good. It completely blew me away.
Yeah,
That
the
dissolving
monster also, you got it.
that dissolve in the final couple of minutes, like the bird's eye view of her spinning around. It's got like, and it's got the dissolve of the faces as well. Oh my god, that was so good. Just the bird's eye shot of her just spinning in a circle with the blood and the arm is so funny. It's crazy. It's just so absurd. The actual show, the New Year's show, there's like kids in the thing. Like all the other backup dancers are just completely topless.
Oh yeah,
And
that was so French. The fact that she had topless
it
like
was.
dancers
It
on her
was
like
so
live TV.
yeah. Oh dear. Yeah, that made me laugh. That was crazy. But yeah, I think Dennis Quaid as well, like him at the end, like the audience, he's like some really excited kid, just from like what he's like, and the way he just talks about Sue and this incredibly kind of controlling manner, like this is my daughter, look what I've created, and
Oh.
it's absurd.
The way the board of directors like skip away from her at the end, that's so funny.
that shot when she's starting to lose teeth and she's trying not to smile, and you're going to get this shot of all the board of directors all crowded in and quite tightly framed, and then they just forget her so easily and just get instantly distracted by the back of dancers and just start running past. It just says so much about this film. But yeah, the last 10 minutes is absurd. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ray Liotta, because he was cast in Dennis Quaid's role before he died.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, I
That
think
would have been
Dennis
interesting.
yeah, we've given a lot of praise to well-deserved praise to Margaret Qualley and Demi Moore, but Dennis Quaid is really hilarious in his portrayal of this character. Like this could have easily been like he could have easily played this role like a sleazebag, really dislikable character, but it's like you don't even take him seriously because he's like just so ridiculous and comedic that I think it adds a more lighthearted approach to the film. In his scenes, also in that final scene, it's I think worth noting that she's wearing light blue, he's wearing orange, which are total opposite ends of the color spectrum. So I think the contrast there was intentional from Fargeat, who's very calculated with her color palette. But yeah, the monster also, for me, I think it's clear, like very inspired by the Elephant Man. Like it feels like they really used that as a kind of model for that design. And as well as the kind of slow dissolves that are used so much in Mulholland Drive, really, those especially feel even more one of the most like clear influences of the film are those kind of semi-dissolved sequences, which I think are great.
The dissolves of like just faces is such a Lynchian thing, like faces on top of things. We see it in like Lost Highway when it's like the guy's face in the bedroom at the opening 45 minutes, just the dissolve on top of the wife's face, and yeah, it's great to see. Great to see people, directors recognizing who the goat is.
Yeah, Lynch
and
is
that Gollum stage is obviously very influenced from The Fly. From the end of that,
yep,
very
a lot
Cronenberg.
of course.
What do you think about Oscar chances? Because I think this would be the travesty of the decade if this didn't win makeup at this point. I don't know if it has any other chance in any other.
I think that's all.
I think. Let's have a look.
So I can tell you what I have. I personally, if I'm deciding the Oscars, this is getting nominated for Best Picture. Coralie Fargeat is getting Best Director nom. Best Demi Moore is getting a Best Actress nom. Margaret Qualley is getting a Best Supporting Actress nom. Best Cinematography should definitely get a nomination and should maybe win. I would. I don't know if I would give it a nomination for best screenplay. It's in like the borderline for me.
It
Right
won
there.
the best screenplay at Cannes, which is interesting.
Yeah, it did.
I did find that interesting because I don't know if that's. I need to read the screenplay to see how it's worded because maybe it is. I feel like it's a lot of it is things that you can't capture on a screenplay. I feel like it's something that because the screenplay they normally want you to write very minimally in terms of what's being shown visually. So I'm just curious how she kind of worded it to express the ideas of the visuals. But I wouldn't be upset if it got a best screenplay nom. Also, would give it a nom for best sound, best costumes, which were very impressive, best editing. I would have it winning best hair and makeup and winning best production design. But I don't think it's getting nominated for anything besides the two I have it winning for.
Yeah, true. Probably not even sound because that usually correlates with best picture. But yeah, horror's often overlooked, so it's probably going to happen with this. Even though I think it is a masterclass in pretty much every department. Got to be makeup though. You can't ignore it for that. I've been saying. I forgot to mention as well that she has been dealing with these kind of like themes and stuff for a while. In 2014, she made a short film where it is. I think it's a brain chip or something where like it turns other people into like the perfect version of themselves. So this is obviously something that she's been thinking of doing for a while, and she probably couldn't deploy it in her first film because I feel like this would have been hard to get made. It's kind of a shock that this got so widely released as it's
movie did a really good job.
Who done a good job?
Really movie. Marketing was good.
Oh yeah.
Seems to be doing really well at the box office compared to someone like A24 who absolutely suck at distributing films and suck at distributing and marketing. Like Sing Sing has I think A24 has ruined Sing Sing's chances of winning Best Picture. But yeah, it's crazy, but yeah, it's just crazy what good marketing and good distributing can do to a film's kind of award season contentions. Because right now, I think Anora and The Brutalist are going to run away with it. To be honest.
Well, I don't know about Oscar chances with that because the Zone of Interest last year, A24 butchered that entire distribution. Like they did a horrible job of that.
They should have won Best Picture if they'd done a good job.
Oppenheimer was walking away with that, but
true.
I do think that in terms of Oscars, it is that good enough, and that a horror movie with that much to say that it really should get awards recognition. But of course, the Oscars with their kind of American ideology towards film is all, the narrative. It's all about the narrative and the character depth. And like the Oscars gonna fucking hate this movie because all they care about is plot half the time. So I just think that they're going to be like, oh, how dare they not use the narrative and all that. So I don't think it's
what is the most dramatic war drama of the year, and we're going to give it to that.
To which one?
I'm just saying, what is the most dramatic war drama, over dramatized war drama of the year? We're just going to give it to that. Oh dear.
But I think it'll pick up a couple of golden shot glasses this year. So I think justice will be served.
Yeah, definitely.
But let's. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on the substance before we move on?
No.
All right, let's get into our Q&A. So every week we answer questions from the audience. There's a link in the description below where you can ask us questions to be featured on a later episode. If your question does not get, if we don't answer it, then no worries. It'll probably be answered on a future episode. We like to keep it to around 5 per episode. So what do we have this week? All right, first question from Disciple Ferdinand. He says, can you explain why you guys think Silence is a good movie when it's absolutely shit? It is not absolutely shit. I'll let someone else start.
The Scorsese Silence?
It might be second best Scorsese film.
The only reason I'm disagreeing with it is because of how good his filmography is, but it is a perfect movie.
is one of the most underappreciated films this century. Andrew Garfield is one of our best working actors, and I think it's his best performance. He is
as
truly
Adam Driver.
unbelievable. And I think Scorsese's handling of religion is one of the best among directors, along with Malik. But yeah, just so delicate and so emotional. And yeah, Scorsese's just that guy.
Yeah, the way he just handles like Catholicism in that
Yeah,
and
I
the
think
Last Temptation of Christ is so good. Sorry,
Yeah, I
I've
think
talked over
Faith
you.
is
You're
as
like
part
lagging
of
for
a
me.
It's probably. Oh, my bad. You spoke like 5 seconds ago for me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
you're
a bit of a
delayed.
delay.
It's
Hold
quite
on.
funny.
Yeah, both of you just reacted to me like 5 seconds later. Well, funny. I like say something and I just watch like stillness and then I see both of you react.
Yeah, it's
But,
the same with us.
Scorsese. So silence is one of faith as a whole, and questions of faith is, if anything, the most instrumental theme in Scorsese's filmography. Whether he's exploring a gangster genre or a more kind of intimate film, it's something that's always there. If you hear him in interviews and his approach to film from the very beginning, all the way dating back to Mean Streets, which is like the first real Scorsese style movie, faith is such a part of Scorsese's psychology. And he is always exploring these kind of questions about faith. And Silence is a true passion project of him that pushes those questions of absolute extremes. And I think that the best films don't tell you what to think. They ask you questions and make you think rather than tell you what to think. And Silence isn't really presenting us an answer on anything. It's just asking us really difficult questions about how far does your faith go? Like at what point is it too far? Like, and just the questions of like how much suffering, like the questions of suffering versus, staying true to your own beliefs. And, at what point is it to go too far, and just the difficult decisions that character has to make and the difficult questions that it's asking us, I think are insanely strong and powerful. And it's a film that just explores so much on such a deep level. So I think it is an absolutely incredible film.
The thing that I always find really interesting with religion in Scorsese is that he's not actually a practicing like Catholic anymore. It's just something that he grew up in. So his films are never like pushing an idea on you. I feel like there's always a lot of conversation about like, am I going to enjoy Silence if I'm a practicing Catholic, or The Last Temptation of Christ? They're focusing on religion and they handle it brilliantly, but they are just brilliant films exploring that. There's no like idea or thing that he's trying to push on you, because him himself isn't exactly fully religious himself. So that's why I always find interesting about the way he handles them.
Well, he is Catholic still. He's just not he
Practicing
describes himself
Catholic.
more as someone who is kind of not a good practicing Catholic, but I know he's still, those beliefs are still a part of him. It's just he is not,
Yeah.
he doesn't, like, he wouldn't consider himself like a good practicing Catholic, which I think adds another layer of depth to the film and his own kind of inner conflicts about it. The next question from Lachie: most overrated film of all time with a 4+ average.
A 4+ average. Good question. Right.
That's a good question.
Oh, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. That is top 250. How I have a hatred for that film. A deep-rooted hatred. It is so boring.
You got
hatred for that film.
It's not top 250 worthy, but it's decent.
I'm going to see what else. I'm just waiting for my stats to load. What else do I have rated lower than average?
Yeah, same.
Rated lower than average. I mean, Dune 2 is kind of overrated, even though I still like it.
Oh, shut the fuck up.
Inside, Bo Burnham's Inside has a 4.2 average. That is awful.
Oh, easy.
Yeah,
Lord of the
Marcel
Rings.
Show. Ah, shut up.
Oh, now you show up. What you doing?
I just don't buy it. I'm like, how is that not? Also, Andrei Rublev is up
Tangled
there.
and Perks of Being a Wallflower have just under a 4.0. Perks of Being a Wallflower, I'd rather drink bleach than sit through a rewatch of Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Autumn Sonata. I think was that like where is that in the top 250? I don't think. Yeah, it's 24th. I don't think this is even like.
Bergman's made a
It's
lot
pushing.
better. Autumn Sonata.
It's pushing on like top 15 Bergman.
Actually, I take mine back. It is not Lord of the Rings or Andrei Rublev. It is the worst film ever made, The Shit Goodbye. I just remembered that above for average. That is without a doubt the worst one. That fucking piece of dog shit.
I'm just glad that Oscar isn't going to say The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 anymore.
Thankfully, balance was restored to the universe today. Next question is from William Garner. Why is Tarantino the GOAT? Because nobody writes
Good question. Easy answer. He isn't.
Now, you can make the argument is, and he probably is, he's easily in the discussion for the greatest writer of all time without a doubt.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
And
Yeah.
you could argue he's the best director of all time. I mean, I wouldn't put him quite as the best director, but I'd understand the argument. I think no one writes characters as specific as Tarantino, and the flow of conversation is so natural, where people talk about his dialogue, but half the time it's not moving the story forward. It's just real. It's things like when he's like, "Oh, my coffee's good because I buy the good kind." And he has like this petty comment about his wife who's not even there. It's like, well, she buys the cheap kind, but I buy the good kind. And like those small little things that are points of focus in people that he understands. And, the repetition of words in his dialogue, they have real like opinions and like day-to-day priorities rather than just serving the plot and the story. And I think it really comes down to his characters. Just everything he does is so ultra specific, along with the fact that he's able to make art and entertain at the same time. He's seen just about every movie ever made ever. So he has he's pulling from so many influences and has such a great understanding of like all the best of different pieces of cinema, where he'll watch like some like 2-star film from, the 70s, but he'll take like this one or two scene or like this shot that's really good. And it's almost like a greatest hits of the history of cinema in terms of his style, and his rhythm and music is just on another level. So yeah, Tarantino is that guy.
I was thinking about this recently. It's Brian De Palma was just interviewed for the release of his Body Double 4K, and he said that films nowadays, they don't feel cinematic like it did back in his day, because one of the reasons he says that everybody's shooting on digital now instead of film like it was back then, and that's something that Tarantino he's always going for, doing stuff practically and with digital like it used to be. He's creating the cinema experience that it used to once be, and he just cares about cinema so much. That's why I love him.
I totally agree that it's digital. I won't go on a huge tangent about it, but yeah, I totally agree. That's why. Next question from Rory Breslin. Would you consider Joel Schumacher an underrated director, discounting Batman films? And they referenced A Time to Kill, 1996, and Falling Down, which they say are fantastic.
I've only seen his Batman films, I think.
I know Falling Down is supposed to be really good. I love The Lost Boys.
They say
I think
discounting
that's one of
his
the best
Batman
horror
films,
movies.
like his Batman films aren't overhated. They're good films.
I thought they meant it was be like they were like his best
Lost
films.
Boys
I
is
didn't
a
think that was a
banger.
big. Yeah.
Lost Boys is a banger. I keep on forgetting he directed that.
So
Batman and Robin is very enjoyable, and so is Batman Forever.
well, in the question it says though subtracting Batman films, but I think those are.
I've only
best films.
subtracting Batman films. I've only seen The Lost Boys. Other than that,
So it's an interesting question actually for this episode, because Joel Schumacher directed St. Elmo's Fire, which stars Demi Moore, also starring what's her name again? Edie McDowell, who is Margaret Qualley's mother. So it was Margaret Qualley's mother and Demi Moore. He directed that film, which I think is a solid film. I liked it when I was younger. Like, I don't know how much I'd like it on a rewatch. Lost Boys is a classic, of course. I've heard good things about Falling Down. I've heard good things about Phone Booth. I rewatched Batman Forever this past weekend, and I fucking love it. Like, it was my first Batman for being like a corporate cash grab, like family friendly Batman movie. It's as perfect as you can ask for from that approach that they were taking. It's incredible production design. Like, it's so much fun the whole runtime. And I am a huge Batman and Robin defender. I love Batman and Robin. I think it's one of the most brilliantly terrible movies ever made. Arnold Schwarzenegger's one-liners are some of the greatest one-liners in movie history. Like, it's both of those movies are so much fun. I think they're actually some of the best Joel Schumacher movies. So I think he's a solid director. I would say he's a solid director.
I honestly, I can't believe Forever got the reputation that it gets, because I mean that got nominated for a cinematography award at the Oscars that year. Like, it wasn't as if it wasn't appreciated at the time. It's so good. It's such an underrated comic book movie, and even Batman and Robin is so much better than like the stuff we get now. But my favorite is Lost Boys. I think it's brilliantly camp comedy. It's in contention for the best vampire movie ever made, in my opinion. And Phone Booth is also very good with Colin Farrell in it. It's a really good thriller. So yeah, I actually want to check out more of his other stuff, because I really like him as a director from what I've seen so far.
All right, this must be a question for you, but it's from Max. It says, "What heat do you get at Nando's?" I don't know what the fuck Nando's is. I'm assuming
You don't know what Nando's is?
we don't have that over here.
Medium.
Yeah, no, you don't. But yeah,
medium, because I think like if it's too high, it just like ruins like the taste of like the meal.
Yeah,
it just like ruins my enjoyment slightly. But medium's the way to go.
Medium is the objective level to go, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And you're pathetic if you go any lower than that.
Oh yeah, definitely. To be fair, like the mild ones have like the different flavorings to them, but no, the medium ones are the best.
So now that you got to hear about whatever the fuck Nando's is, that wraps up our Q&A. Drop us some questions in the description below to be featured either next week or in a prior episode or in a future episode. I forgot to ask everyone, where does The Substance rank in your 2024 rankings as of right now?
I think I have it 11th.
Oh, wow. I thought it was higher for you.
It was, but I think it like dropped a bit because I dropped my rating. But then I was kind of looking at the other films, but I was like, I realized, there's some films that I've actually been growing on me that I like more as well. But yeah, currently 11th. But I think it's been a great year. So, yeah, a great film.
It's easily my number 2 of the year. I could see it maybe going past in with rewatches, possibly. I don't know. And it's in my like top 15 of the decade. Honestly, I really, really love this. It's up there. What about you?
Yeah, this is my number 3 on the year. It's really like could be fitting of the number 2 spot. I think it likely cracks my top 20 on the decade. It's only behind 2 films, which I think are just easily 2 of the elite premiere films of the decade, being Dune Part 2 and Red Rooms. But this film, I really did love. It really just blew me away. It's like we said earlier, it's everything I love in cinema. And I'm just so happy we were able to get a near silent movie with such great commentary and on the modern world from such a talented new filmmaker. So it's my number 3 on the year. Which I feel I wasn't very high on this year, but I was staying optimistic. And now this weekend, seeing the films that have taken my number 2 and number 3 spot, it's definitely getting a lot better. I'm getting closer to feeling pretty good about my top 10. So
yeah, I feel like it's really elevated like the standard of horror this year as well. It's up there for challenging 2018 with like the Hereditaries and stuff. We've still got Nosferatu as well, which could really elevate that even further, like to probably the greatest films of the year. I hope, at least. Hopefully Nosferatu doesn't disappoint.
Totally agree. I don't think it will, though.
No.
We're dealing with Robert Eggers there.
Yeah, it's Robert Eggers. It's never going to happen.
All right, so that wraps up our episode on The Substance. One of the best films of the year for sure. Definitely a film that we recommend you revisit, and hopefully we were able to help give you some things to look for and pay attention to on a rewatch, and hopefully enjoy it even more. But thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, all that stuff, and we'll be back next week. Thank you.